Hi, my friend. Welcome back to the show. And today we're talking about the most unexpected way to reduce emotional eating. So let's get right into it. Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. I am so excited to talk about today's topic, and I know that it probably feels like I say this all the time, and it's honestly because I mean it. And especially today, what we're talking about is so timely and it's really necessary. And whenever I'm wondering, okay, what do I want to talk about on the podcast? What does my audience, what do my listeners, what does my community need to hear? I really tune into some of the challenges that people are facing. And right now, it is no secret that there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of change. There's a lot going on in the news and in the headlines, and there is this general increased sense of anxiety, of stress, overwhelm, depressive symptoms. And, I've been experiencing my own level of stress and anxiety, and I've kind of been going back and forth about how much do I share, how much do I talk about, because I am really taking care of myself. I'm making sure that I am regulating, that I'm tending to my nervous system, that I'm doing what I can to make sure that I'm not spiking my cortisol, I'm not spiking my adrenaline, and always feeling on edge and consuming all of this negative news that's just not going to serve me. So I've kind of been going through my own transitional phase and really recognizing that there is no positive that comes out of me feeding into fear. There's no positive that comes out of me giving my power away to people who are intentionally trying to take your power away. So with that in mind, one thing that I know that a lot of people, especially women who struggle with their relationship with food, who may have developed this pattern of turning to food when you feel stressed, when you feel emotional, when you feel overwhelmed, when you feel dysregulated. Maybe you developed this pattern at a very young age. If you grew up in a family that was unstable or felt unsafe, there was a lot of unpredictability, you didn't have this core feeling of safety. And that's so necessary for human beings, right? Like if you are new here, welcome. And one of the things that makes this podcast really different and the approach that I take with my clients inside of Food Freedom Academy very different and effective, shall I say, is that we understand that turning to food, whether it's binge eating, emotional eating, overeating, but also on the other side of the spectrum, restricting, dieting, disordered eating, all of those things are not the problem. Right? When you are in diet culture, you have been taught that food is the problem and that you need to control food and you need to limit food. And if you just change what you eat, then the problem's going to be solved. But food is just a symptom. In the same way that scrolling on Instagram for hours to distract yourself or make you feel better is also a symptom of something else. So you could replace eating with doom scrolling, with binge watching TV, with drinking or smoking, right? All of these things that we do to experience temporary relief from discomfort that we feel. And that discomfort is caused by something deeper. So what really makes this different is that we look at what is the root cause. What is causing the overeating, what is causing the emotional eating, the binge eating. Because as long as you don't figure that out, as long as we don't address the deep-rooted reasons why we do something, the roots are still there. So if you imagine that there's weeds growing on your front lawn and you just pass the lawnmower over it over and over and over again, it's going to keep growing back because you haven't ripped out the roots. So the first thing that I encourage you to do as you're listening to this is to pause and ask yourself, do I really know why I struggle with food so much? Beyond what you've been fed about willpower or discipline or self-control, because that might be where your mind goes, right? I'm just not disciplined enough, don't have enough willpower. And if that was the case, if willpower was the solution, then we would use willpower to change everything in our life, right? We would never press snooze. We would never miss the gym. If the solution was really just try harder and be better, then we would have done it by now. And there are definitely areas in your life where you do have willpower, right? Where you do have discipline. Maybe it's as a mother, the amount of things that you need to do that you don't want to do as a mother, or in your career, as a worker, in a relationship, right? There's so many things that we do that we don't necessarily want to do. But when it comes to eating and when it comes to making a change in our eating, it's not about willpower. Because willpower in and of itself is a temporary, finite resource. If you imagine your willpower to be like your phone battery, you plug in your phone battery at night and then you wake up, it's full, you use it throughout the day. By the end of the day, your phone's dead. You need to plug it in again. And so willpower is not this consistent, reliable thing. So we want to get that out of the way to stop blaming ourselves and feeling like there's something wrong with us, like fundamentally broken about us. None of us are born broken and with this like inability to have a healthy relationship with food. So everything has been learned. And so going back to this pattern of emotional eating, you learned that at one point in your life. When I feel discomfort, when I feel stressed, when I feel these emotions, these feelings, these things in my body that don't feel good, when I eat, it goes away. It feels better, even if it's just temporary, right? Like we know that after you're done emotional eating, you feel the shame and the regret and the remorse and the guilt and thinking like, I can't believe I've done this again. And then you get this rush and this wave of those emotions coming back. And then on top of that, you feel discomfort because maybe you've overeaten and you don't feel good physically. So we can understand that in the long run, it doesn't make us feel better. And it's just this temporary fix. And so we eat to numb, to distract ourselves, to think about something else, to make ourselves feel better. So you've learned that at one point in your life. And the thing about your patterns around food is that everything is habit. Everything is repeated cycles. So your nervous system, and if you're new here, then I would go back to some of our previous episodes where we've talked about your nervous system, but really your nervous system learns through repetition. So if, for example, I know that every time, this is going to be a really personal example, I used to struggle with overworking. So, before overworking, it was emotional eating. So every night after 8 p.m., once the day was done and I was sitting with my own feelings and I had to confront, the discomfort and the loneliness and all of those things that I kept myself busy around during the day. Well, when nighttime rolled around, it was like everything would consume me all at once in the silence. And so I didn't know how to deal with that. I was never taught how to process emotions. I was never taught how to regulate myself, like self-regulation, how to soothe myself. So all I knew was eat. So I would eat all night and I would try to fill that emotional void. And of course, because it was an emotional void and I had emotional needs that I wasn't satisfying, I would just eat and eat and eat. And there was like no stopping because there wasn't any satisfaction. Because what I needed in that moment was to address my emotional needs. I didn't need more food. So that's what I used to do. And then of course, I healed my relationship with food. I learned to self-regulate. I learned to break that pattern of emotional eating, which was a game changer. It really was. And I developed all of these different tools and strategies in order to break that pattern. But then I started overworking. So if I felt discomfort, then I would work and it would temporarily distract me and to make me feel better. And then I was able to notice that pattern. So then I went to work again of, okay, what's going on here? What do I need to address? And it is this continuous process of learning how to sit with your emotions, how to process them in a really healthy way. And that's what module 3 of Food Freedom Academy is all about, is I am teaching you how to address the root cause of your emotional eating so that you don't even have to use willpower to stop it, because willpower doesn't work. You don't even have the urge to eat anymore because you're addressing the reasons why you used to eat. So in the context of what's going on right now, if you've been experiencing more stress, more anxiety, maybe you've been feeling apathetic, just like low motivation, low energy, not wanting to do much, kind of disconnected, shut down, and you've noticed that you've been turning to food more. Maybe you've been eating more often, you've been hungrier, you've been looking for food to comfort yourself. If you feel like maybe you were making progress and now you're kind of backtracking, I want to start off by saying that it's completely normal, especially if you've never learned how to regulate your emotions. Right now, you're experiencing a heightened sense of dysregulation. Your nervous system is feeling more of this uncertainty, and we don't like uncertainty. As humans, we would much rather know for certain about a negative outcome than be uncertain about whether it's going to be good or bad. And a perfect example of this is we would rather keep dieting because at least we know predictably what's going to happen. I'm going to lose the weight, I'm going to restrict, and then chances are I'm going to hit a plateau. I'm going to gain the weight back. We don't consciously think that because obviously we wouldn't continue to do it if we expected that, but we subconsciously know what to expect versus the thought of going on a journey to heal your relationship with food, to break free from dieting, doing something completely different. Now, if you've never done that before, that offers a lot of uncertainty. And we don't like uncertainty. So we would rather keep doing a thing that we know doesn't work than to kind of jump off the ledge and be in this weird limbo of, I don't know what's going to happen here. Even if we know from research, even if you've heard the stories on the podcast or from friends and family, that healing your relationship with food and becoming an intuitive eater is the best thing that you can do for your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. So we don't like uncertainty. And right now, there's a lot of it. So what I want to talk about now is one of the most unexpected ways that you can reduce emotional eating in this time where stress might be higher, uncertainty is higher, a lack of safety is higher. And then we're going to talk about 5 ways or 5 tips to implement this unexpected way to reduce emotional eating. So let's talk about what that is. And like I said, it's called unexpected because most of you are probably going to be like, what? What is she talking about? So what that way is to make you feel more regulated, to reduce the amount of stress, is actually to limit or, if possible, eliminate your exposure to news and your exposure to social media. And I put those in the same bucket because nowadays, like you can, I'm not going to say you get your news from social media because I mean, most of it is not true, but you still get exposed to everything that's going on in the world at the touch of your fingertips. Like you open this little screen and then you get bombarded with information. And so let's talk about why this is so important. There is so much research around the effects of consuming the news on your brain, on your nervous system. So consuming the news, what it really does is it activates your sympathetic nervous system. So your sympathetic nervous system is that branch of your nervous system that activates when there's stress around. So if you think about, like, let's say you're just dallying on the street, you're walking around, and then a bike zooms past in front of you. What happens? You feel your entire body tense up. You feel your heart rate start to race, your pupils dilate, you start to breathe differently. You really feel like immediately something has turned in how your body feels. Well, that's because your nervous system perceived a threat. It perceived there is something that can put your life in danger, or there's something that can be dangerous for you, not necessarily life-threatening, but dangerous for you. So what do we need to do? We need to put all of your resources towards being able to handle that threat. So if you needed to stop, if you needed to fight the threat, or if you needed to run away from the threat. So that's when you get caught in that fight or flight. So it's actually a really useful branch of our nervous system because it's there to keep us alive. If you think of like years, millions of years ago when we were just cavemen walking around in the desert and you are out hunting for food and then you come face to face with a saber-toothed lion. Well, now you have two options if you want to stay alive. It's to fight the lion or to run away from the lion. So chances are you're going to decide not to fight the lion, so you're going to run away. So all of your resources go towards running away. It goes towards surviving. So in those moments, when you are in that sympathetic nervous system activation, you're not able to tap into that logical, long-term thinking part of your brain. You are thinking about right now. What do I do right now? So your resources move away from that part of your brain that's able to think clearly, that's able to make decisions for the long term about what's going to be best for my mental health or my physical health. And you get kind of frozen into, well, what do I need to do right now in order to survive? So understanding why that sympathetic nervous system activation can be important is really crucial, because what happens is now we are not being chased by saber-toothed lions, but we are still exposing ourselves to these stressors that keep turning on that sympathetic nervous system activation. So seeing a catastrophic headline that is meant to have you react, that is meant to put you in the fear response, will trigger that fight or flight for you. And if you haven't learned how to regulate yourself out of fight or flight back into this state of calm and this state of peace, well, what do? You turn to food. So over time, the more you expose yourself to these headlines and this news and this worry and this stress of what's going on around the world, it's like the death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's all of these micro stressors throughout the day that are keeping you in fight or flight. And when you are in a survival response, I feel like I don't need to tell you about the detrimental effects of stress on the body, but you probably know it by now. The fight or flight response affects so many things. It affects your immune system. So you're going to get sick more. You're going to be more prone to infection. It affects your ability to think clearly, to focus, to concentrate. It affects your ability to be present as well, because you're either reliving the past or you're worried about the future. And so now you keep living into this fear, and it's really hard to achieve your highest potential when you're just trying to survive. So what you're really doing is you are throwing yourself into this survival response, into this stress response every day without even realizing it. So of course, if you feel like you've been eating more lately, you've been turning to food more to soothe yourself, it's because that's all you know. When you're feeling dysregulated and you've never learned how to sit with those emotions, how to process those emotions, how to regulate yourself and bring yourself back to a state of calm without turning to food, it's that only sense of temporary comfort. Or maybe you're scrolling on Instagram or on social media more, which we think is making us feel better, but that's actually creating more stress in our body. So it's this super vicious cycle. So I know that you might be thinking, but I need to be informed. I need to watch the news. And you might not be, this is important. You might not be actively seeking out the news. Maybe you are someone who watches it on a daily basis. Maybe it's just like headlines that pop up on your phone. Maybe it's showing up on your social media. Whatever your exposure to it is, one thing that I know is that I actively avoid the news. So I haven't watched the news in years. I've disabled the news app on my phone years ago. I unfollow anything on my social media that triggers that stress response, because you have two options. You have option one, which is to learn how to regulate your nervous system, which obviously is the best solution, but also to help you and to support you in that option two, which is to remove or reduce the amount of stressors that you're exposed to every day so that you don't have that activated nervous system response, so that you don't constantly spend your time in survival mode. And we now live in a world where most people are living in survival mode. Most people are living in stress, in anxiety. So of course, there's more reliance on doom scrolling on Instagram or TikTok. There's more reliance on distraction or buffering, addiction, right? Like all of these things have the same root cause, which is how your nervous system is doing. And so we need to get really, really disciplined about taking care of our nervous system and doing what we can in order to not actively send ourselves into a stress response. So I hope that I'm making a case for this right now to help you understand how crucial it is. And I think that there is a movement right now where less and less people are watching the news, because here's the thing, news outlets, social media, they know what they're doing. They know what sells and what gets people's attention. And what do you think that is? If you guessed fear, you were right. Fear. Because human beings, again, we have one goal, and it's to survive. So we have more of a bias towards negative information. That's why if you look at the news, it's negative information. Like the headlines aren't really like Good Samaritan helps others, create a better life. You'll see that from time to time. But what actually gets people talking, what actually makes the front page is the things that create fear. Because if you really look at yourself and if you evaluate how you respond to a headline that gets your attention, it's something that says, look out for this. Be on the alert for this threat that could be dangerous to you. So when you can understand that this is intentional, fear is to humans what moths are to a flame. Is that the right? You know what I mean. No, I may have turned that around, but you know what I mean. So we get compelled towards it. It's like human nature and biology. We are designed to look for threats. So let's talk about what this could actually look like. If you're now starting to understand, okay, wow, I didn't realize how much I was putting my own body in stress by either consuming the news or spending so much time on social media. We were not designed to have so much information bombarded at us. Then let's talk about what it could look like for you to create an environment for yourself and set yourself up for success so that you can spend more time with a nervous system that is regulated, with a nervous system that can be present, that can be calm, that can be non-reactive, non-impulsive. Think through your decisions, because that's another thing, is when you are in that state of calm, you're able to think through your decisions. You're able to take more time. You're not as impulsive. You are able to think long-term, right? Like, how is this going to serve me 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Whereas when you're in that stress response, you can't do that. So it's really beneficial for your habits around food, the way you interact with your partner. You're going to be less impulsive. You're going to lash out less. You're going to be able to have more control over your emotional responses. So the first thing, so let's go into 5 tips to implement this, to create an environment for your nervous system to feel more regulated. The first thing is to notice how you feel. Notice how you feel before consuming the news, before seeing a headline, before going on social media, and then how you feel after. How you feel in your body. So do you feel a change in your heart rate? Do you feel a change in your respiration? Do you feel a change in the tension in your body, in your thoughts? What are you thinking about? Did you switch from being okay to being worried, to being okay to being in fear, to being stressed? So really start paying attention to how you feel before and after. And an example of this is like I said before, I'm very intentional about reducing the stressors that I have in my day, because if I want to do my most important work, if I want to be able to focus on helping people, on putting good content out there, on making a difference, it is number one priority to be in a good state of mind. I need to be able to be focused, to be concentrated, to not be living in fear and in stress. So I have really made an effort to remove anything that does send me in a state of stress. But this happened, I would say, a few days ago. I was opening the weather app to look at what kind of weather to prepare for the day. And right underneath the weather app, there's like a little banner of weather news. So these little like headlines and different articles. And one of the headlines, one of the articles was, it wasn't positive and it was a little catastrophic. I didn't even open this article. Okay, you guys, like I know better. I just saw the headline and I noticed that immediately there was a change in my physiology. There was a change in my mindset. I went from being okay to being stressed to catastrophizing. And I noticed that I kept thinking about that headline all day, not like consistently all day, but it would pop up. And my thought processes were different. And the things I was focusing on were different. And this all happened from reading one headline accidentally. So now imagine how reading an entire article or being bombarded by headline after headline, negative news after negative news all day, how it might be impacting you without even realizing it. So the first thing is to start paying attention to how you feel before and how you feel after in your body, in your thoughts, and how it affects you for the rest of your day. Because this is going to give you some indication of, okay, is this a problem possibly? Is this affecting me without being aware of it? So the second thing is that if you do notice that watching the news, reading the news, spending so much time on social media. And I just want to say a little aside as well. Spending time on social media, it might be impacting you, not just because you're bombarded with what's going on around the world, but also just the comparison. Like the thoughts that you're having, oh, she looks so much better than me. Her life is so much better than me. They're traveling, they're doing this, I'm doing nothing. All of that is stressful too. Like being compared to other people and seeing other people's lives. Again, human beings are not designed for so much information thrown at you every day. And all of that stimulation, it's a lot for your nervous system. Think of when you go to a party and there's like a lot of people, a lot of noise, a lot of lights, and instantly you're like, oh my God, this is so much. I need to step outside, just kind of calm myself, be alone for a second. Now you're doing that to yourself every day when you're on social media and you're being bombarded with information. And I hope that this is not like coming from a place of I'm perfect and I'm never on social media. That's not at all the case. And I would say that in the past few months has been an intentional effort for me to spend less time on social media, to be very intentional about what I consume, because I did notice that it was affecting me and that I needed to put some measures in place to take care of myself. So the second thing, so if you do realize that being bombarded with so much information is triggering regular symptoms of anxiety or depression, then you have full permission to remove any exposure altogether. We have this belief that I need to be informed. I need to know what's going on in the world. I need, like, this is all necessary. And the truth is, number one, no, you don't. Most of these things you don't have control over. You don't have power over. And so then you end up feeling powerless. And that's the point, right? These people in power want you to feel powerless. They want you to feel like you have no control over anything so that you kind of retreat and you're easier to control. So that's not what we want. We don't want to feel hopeless or powerless every single day. We want to focus on what we do have control over. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that the things that you really do need to know about, don't worry, you will know about them. I will say this again, I'm very intentional about limiting my exposure to news. And whenever there's something that I need to know about, I know about it. I hear about it, someone tells me about it, I see it somewhere, it makes its way into my stratosphere. So giving yourself permission to set energetic boundaries around what you consume, and instead you can ask a close friend, you can ask a loved one that you trust to fill you in on accurate and important information and updates. There's no reason that any of us need to be exposed to the news beyond that. And if it means also muting people or blocking people or deleting people on Instagram, do that too. I say Instagram because I'm not really on TikTok that much. I'm going back on TikTok now, but give yourself permission. Whenever I notice that there's an account on my feed that pops up that triggers that stress response, I just immediately say, great, I don't need to have this on my page anymore. I don't need to put myself into stress for this piece of information that added nothing to my life. So that's the second one, is that give yourself permission to actually remove exposure to anything that is not serving you. The third one is that, let's say that seems a little too extreme, a little bit too big of a jump. Set limits. So I have those like screen limits on my phone from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. So it's all of my waking hours. So I can't go on social media apps during that time. They're locked. Now I can choose to like turn off the lock for 15 minutes or for the rest of the day. So it will prompt me and ask me, do you want to unlock for the next 15 minutes? And sometimes I do that if I want to check in with my Food Freedom Academy Facebook group, or if I want to post on social media, on Instagram, or answering DMs. But it makes me think twice. It makes me consider, Do I really want to do this? Is this intentional, or is this just muscle memory that I'm clicking on the app because I'm bored, because I have nothing to do, just doom scrolling for, God knows how long. So it might look like setting limits on your phone to, at least in the beginning, work yourself out of those habits. It could also look like removing those settings on certain apps that have the banners or the headlines. Like I have on my Google app, they used to have a little section for the news underneath it. So if I wanted to Google something, these news articles would pop up, and I didn't like that. So I turned it off. I'm going to try to figure out a way to remove the headlines from my weather app, which I didn't realize I would need to do. But all of these things that, again, I'm not deciding to be uninformed. Like seeing a headline about global warming and climate change does not serve me. I cannot create anything different beyond what I'm already doing right now. Therefore, it is not beneficial to my day, and it takes my focus away from what I do have control over. So setting limits around settings, around your apps, and it could be maybe you don't want to put a actual lock, but saying, I'm going to put my phone in another room while I'm working, or I'm going to turn it off, or I'm going to have set times during the day where I allow myself to go on these apps and really, again, pay attention to how I feel. So that's the third tip for you. The fourth one is to give yourself permission to limit your exposure to other stressors as well. So again, this is a reminder that when you are under stress, you will be more likely to overeat as a way to temporarily soothe yourself, to have temporary relief if you have not yet learned other ways to regulate your nervous system. And inside of Food Freedom Academy, there's a reason why we have a few different lessons and exercises to help you build what I call your emotional toolbox, so that you don't just have food as a way to regulate yourself, which is just an artificial regulator, but you have all of these different strategies, right, in order to actually address the root cause. So it's important to diversify, to not put all of your eggs in one basket, but to have a basket with a lot of eggs. That made no sense. It's okay. Just scratch that. We're going to keep that in. So limiting your exposure to other stressors. So this could be people and conversations. So if you have a family member who is constantly posting links to questionable articles from unknown sources, go ahead and unfollow them for now. If a friend or a coworker insists on having these negative conversations talking about current events that don't feel productive and they only increase your anxiety, you can put some boundaries in place with them. I have no shame whenever this doesn't happen often because me and my friends are very much aligned in the way that we care for our energies, and we don't give our energies to things that don't deserve it. But if I ever get caught in a conversation that just doesn't feel productive, that is not helpful, I have no problem just saying, hey, I don't really want to talk about this right now. And if that's not the case, I'll walk away. It's okay. I'll protect my own energy. So that's another one that you can do, is just give yourself permission to have boundaries around your own energy and take care of yourself. And then the last one, which is my favorite one, is to focus on positive news. That is one of the things over the past few weeks I've been asking myself. It seems like there's so much negative news, and that's all that people are talking about. And it makes you seem like there's nothing good happening, which is obviously not the case. But when everyone is focusing on the same thing, then you forget about the other side of the coin, which is that there are still really good things happening in the world. There's a lot of progress being made. So I have actively started seeking out accounts on Instagram that perpetuate these good news, that talk about things that are moving forward and ways that we can help and that we can support each other. So seeking out those accounts, there is so much research that shows the positive impact of seeing these good news articles, seeing people helping each other, the power of community and connection, and all of that is going to help bring back a sense of calm, help bring you back to a state of safety, which will make it less likely for you to need to turn to eating, to emotional eating to make yourself feel better. Starting to seek out other ways to feel better that don't involve food. So that's that for you. So I'm going to repeat those 5 tips. So number 1 is to notice how you feel before and after watching, reading the news, being on social media. The second is that if you do notice that these things are triggering regular symptoms of anxiety, depression, giving yourself permission to remove all exposure to it and, knowing and trusting that you will be notified about anything that is important. Third one is to set limits on your phone, the settings on your app, spending less time on your screen. The fourth is to limit your exposure to other stressors, people, conversations, setting energetic boundaries. And then lastly is to actively seek out positive news. Share it, talk about it, uplift it, and give it more energy. So those are the 5 things. I really hope that you take this to heart because I never share anything that I don't think will make a massive difference in your life. And when you can be proactive about removing the stressors that you do have control over, because there's things that we don't have control over, right? If you're feeling financial instability, if you're having relationship conflict, your job is stressful, we can't have control over every stressor in our life. And there are some that we do have control over. And some of us don't take that into account. So look at what you have control over. Look at what is draining your energy and what is uplifting your energy. Remove the things that drain and increase the things that uplift. And you might notice a massive difference in how you feel in your body, how you feel in your mind, your emotional state, and then its positive impact on your relationship with food as well. So I love you so much. If you are struggling right now, I'm sending you so much love. Please send me a message on Instagram. I am there for you, and I would love to hear what your takeaways were from this episode. I'll see you on the next one. And again, if no one has told you, you matter, you're important, and take care of yourself. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.